Zara. Everyone is having a great Friday. I just launched a new video on YouTube. If you want to go check that out, it's a video of one of my favorite Curtis Fuller tunes. Of course, Curtis passed away on last week, Friday or Saturday, and of course, he's been a huge influence on me and many other people. I'd venture to say probably every single trombonist, jazz trombonist for sure. So one of my favorite tunes of his called The Court. So I did that this week, and I just posted it up on YouTube. So if you want to check that out later or right now or whatever you want to do, I had a lot of fun making that. And yeah, just a great reminder, he, said in a masterclass at Juilliard when I was there, we were talking about, what would you do differently? And, the thing that he brought up was that, he would have written more compositions because those are what last beyond your lifetime. And so I think it's important, at least now for me, to keep that in mind and try to keep Curtis's tunes alive and all of that sort of thing. So at any rate, I'll be doing that, and hopefully others will be doing the same. I'm sure they will. I don't think we're going to get too far without Curtis's influence permeating forever. So thanks for joining today. Of course, we're here for our Q&A. If you are interested in the Jazz Trombone Bootcamp, we're filling up fast, especially for the masterclass participant level. Everyone's, of course, going to come to the masterclass, but only a few people are going to have reserved slots to be able to play. So if you want to be one of those people, make sure you sign up for the bootcamp sooner rather than later, and make sure you sign up for the end of the month. The early bird pricing is going to end at the beginning of June. So by the end of the month, by end of May 2021, make sure you get signed up for the bootcamp if you want to be there, which of course we'd love to have you. So let me know. DJ, who's on the call, is going to be teaching, as well as Jack Courtwright. We've got Vince Gardner. We've got Andre Hayward. We've got Steve Davis. We've got Michael Davis. And we're just working out which particular days they'll be hanging out with us. But it's going to all be June 14th to 18th. So go ahead. I know on Facebook and YouTube, you can go down below and click the links. Otherwise, we're going to get right into the Q&A here. So feel free to drop in your questions for this week's Q&A. Thanks, Taylor, for the comment. Nice shirt. So this shirt, if you couldn't see it, is from the Monterey Jazz Festival. What year was it? 2019, maybe? 2019, I think. We played, maybe it was 2018. Can't really remember. But it was with the Anat Cohen Tentet, and we played out there in Monterey. That was my first time playing the festival. It's a very, very excellent festival if you've never been. Legendary festival. So, can't wait to get back and do some of those things. Supposed to play at the Detroit Jazz Festival this year. We'll see if that continues on as planned. That's also with Anat, so we'll hopefully make that happen. I mean, obviously it's not up to us really, up to the festival organizers and all of that. So anyway, what's up, Jason? Inflow, hello. Frank, hi. Richard, hi. Bossy Trombone, I'm not going to bring anybody on. All right, so I see some questions rolling in, so we'll just dive into the Q&A. As always, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll see them, or on Instagram in the comment stream, and I'll get to as many as I can this afternoon. So first question, what's up, Mike? From DJ, how do you get booked for festivals? Do you apply or are you booked? There are festivals you can apply to. Generally speaking, a festival is booked by promoters that talk to booking agents, and there's often routing configurations where they try to book all the festivals with similar groups so that they save on travel costs. But so some big festival like Monterey, for example, is going to just do whatever they want, and there's kind of a standalone event. It's not really a situation where you're going to get someone reaching out to you out of the blue. It's definitely going to be a situation where you've been building up your reputation enough to be kind of on the radar of the people that book the festival. You can obviously pitch them. So but to think you're not just going to get an opportunity out of the blue. You got to think about like a trajectory to like you're working with certain other people, and those certain other people, maybe you played as a side person at the festival with these people, and then, kind of slowly build it up. But you got to start somewhere, and you do have to pitch at the beginning 100%. And I'm still pitching myself. And there was if you guys know Erica von Kleist, who's a great alto saxophonist, flautist, who was in New York, was a Juilliard person, played with Winton and the just Jazz Lincoln Center Band. Now she lives out in Montana, but she posted yesterday about the lack of diversity in the Blue Note Jazz Festival's lineup for this year, and was talking about the fact that she's still pitching herself too, and I would consider her someone that doesn't need to pitch, but she does. She says she does have to do it too. So that you have to basically just get enough awareness that people want to book you on a festival. Okay, I see some other questions, but Richard asked, what are some of my favorite Curtis Fuller tunes? So I like the one that I posted today. The Court is a good one. And I mean, there's a bunch of good ones. A la Mode is a great one. I love, this isn't his tune, but he plays But beautifully. Of course, some of the stuff he brought for the Messengers. The Maze is a good one. His version, not to be confused with Herbie Hancock's similarly titled composition. Those are a couple, but yeah, I like that. The Court, that's good. Curtis always writes these kind of simple kind of tunes. There's like Ladies Night and what's that? The Breeze and I. There's like a bunch. It's like simple melodies. Okay, I'm going back here. Okay, I got Taylor. What's up, Taylor? Brian, do you think jazz trombone is at an inherent disadvantage economically compared to... I'm not sure what you mean, disadvantage economically compared to... You just mean like in terms of the ability to be hired? I think that's a double-edged sword, because trombone has a lot of ability to be hired as a side person in terms of like ensembles. Okay, so like a saxophonist, they can like work as a solo saxophonist or like with a DJ, but then like we can also do brass quintet gigs, and we can do brass ensembles and brass bands, and like saxophone is not maybe as much involved there. So like I don't really think about it that way. It's like saxophone has its role, trumpet has its role, trombone has its role, and obviously they can cross over, but like as to be employed, like if you can especially get into like the like you might think like in an American wedding band, the trombone might be for the first horn cut. But if you go to, say, salsa music, for example, the trombone is like essential, and they're not going to cut it. They'll at least have one trombone and one trumpet. So you got to just know that like if you can diversify what sort of musical skills you have, what sort of musical situations that you can perform in, there are actually more opportunities for trombone than for saxophone. But if you want to play smooth jazz, you might want to play saxophone, So I think it's all contextual. All right, from Bossy Trombone, he says, any tips of improving the combination of tongue and rhythm? Yeah, so I think about it like your tongue is like a drumstick. This is what Steve Trey says, and I'm going to just steal it and say it again. Your tongue is like a drumstick, and so your articulation is your rhythm. So the cleaner your articulation is on the trombone, the cleaner your rhythm is. The more clear your rhythm is, the more clarity with which you can play and communicate. So it's a matter of just being extremely clear with your articulation. That's the step one, like making a clear articulation, and then you can practice putting it into time and then manipulating it within the time. All of those things kind of happen in steps. But without the clarity first, you have no hope of being able to communicate rhythmically. So the first thing I always work on is the clarity of the articulation. That means the note has to have a nice front to it, a nice body, and a nice release, separation. Okay, from Taylor. If you could go back and fix one gig you played that went terribly, what would you fix? A good question. Oh man, one gig that went terribly. I don't know. I probably erased that gig from my mind, really. I can't really think of one. Anytime he's like, I think the only times that like stick out in my mind that are really like embarrassing or terribly would be like on a Broadway show, like stepping in a huge hole or playing a cue loud and wrong. Like that's a really embarrassing moment. That those stand out to me more than like on a gig, like playing some wrong notes or something. Like just that, like thinking that this was the cue, but that was the cue for the rhythm section, and this was your cue. You know, meaning the head nod was your cue, not the up and down cue. So, you know, it is what it is. But I would say though that's kind of what I would fix. Being able to read the conductor's mind, which is hard. What are questions you wish your trombone students or students in jazz studies would ask more? What do you think they don't ask enough of? What questions don't they ask? They don't ask about like the best thing you can do with a teacher is be really passionate about stuff and bring it into your lessons. And like be like, I am so curious about this thing. Can we talk about this? And like be learning things on your own. And like it gets so much in the niche of like, I'm going to do exactly what my teacher says and like go down this path. But like it's not as effective as like doing everything they say and showing what you're interested in. Like you have to show what you're interested in, you know, like whether it's harmony or composition or reharmonization or arranging or another player that they are checking out that I don't check out, or something modern, be like, man, how do I do this? Like, how do I do this? How do I like finding stuff that we can work on together is something that doesn't happen that often. Sometimes, but it doesn't happen that often. And it definitely doesn't happen that often that the student will bring in extra stuff, you know, like, oh, I'm working on this. Like, yes, I'm going to assign you stuff because like we're having lessons, but at the same time, like you got to take it on your own and like go beyond. Say like, oh, I'm working on this. Can we talk about this today? Like it's both. And so I think that a lot of students don't, it's not really a question, but it's more of like what they don't do is have stuff that they're working on. That's like for them, you know? So I wish that they would think about that more. Oh, Daniel, hello. From Sweden. Amazing. Oh, you started reading The Practice and Fooled by Randomness. Nice. Fooled by Randomness can get a little in the weeds a little bit about statistics, but overall, I think it was really super interesting. How would you best describe the music scene in Denton? Let me come back to that. So Blake says, do you teach lessons? Yes, I just got off a lesson right before this, so I was a little late. Definitely teach lessons. The summer is pretty much the only time where I take lessons that are not UNT related lessons. So if you want to take lessons in the summer, there's also a link on YouTube and Facebook to either a package that's a summer package or just one-off lessons. But Taylor says, how would you describe the music scene in Denton? I don't know. All the stuff that I know about kind of circulates around the school. So all the jazz stuff that I find out kind of is circling around UNT. And it's a very active scene. There's a lot going on. There's places to play. There's some jazz venues. There's Steve's Wine Bar. They have jazz often. There were some places with some jam sessions. There, I mean, everything's kind of been shut down. So it's kind of TBD what's going to be like opening back up, how it's going to be when we get back to normal, you know, or whenever that normal-ish thing will be. So that's a little hard for me to tell you. Yes, I teach lessons. Jared. Hi, Jared. Thanks for joining us. Could you name 2 teachers you've had and one aspect of trombone playing that stuck with you from each teacher? Sure. What comes to mind? Well, the 2 things that come to mind right away, I'm sure there's definitely more than this. I said this just a second ago, is that your tongue is like a drumstick, right? That's from Steve Turay. And you talk about that in terms of articulation and rhythm and intensity of rhythm. That sticks out in my mind as a thing that I used a lot. And then that's from Steve Turay. And then from from my teacher at Eastman, Mark Kellogg. Mark Kellogg, he always used to talk about playing in tune with yourself, and that I needed to do a better job of playing in tune with myself. So, it took me a while to realize what he meant, but like our pitch center tends to move around if we're playing unaccompanied. Sorry for all the noise. There's like a bunch of things happening out the window here. So playing in tune with yourself, that's one that I have taken a long way. He used to say something to the effect of, I don't mean to be the pitch police, but you really need to play D in first position in the same intonation as D in fourth position, or some other example, or like if you play, like a great example of this is if you're playing like the beginning of the Bach cello suite, right? You play a low G and then you play some other notes and then you got to return to the G and you got to play that G the same, right? Like the same intonation has to be for the first G and the second G that's like a couple notes later. So that's playing in tune with yourself. And then the third, I got a bonus tip for you. So the third thing, this one from Wycliffe Gordon, and this isn't something he said, but something he never said. And that was, he would often never explain exactly what he was doing. And for a long time, I felt like that was like not a weakness, but it was like I thought it was a negative thing. But as the older I've gotten and more I've taught, the more I realize how important it is to do that and kind of set up a situation where the student has to figure it out on their own and create that cognitive dissonance between like, well, you do it like this, and then you show them, and maybe you can give them a couple pointers, but like really they got to go and get it, right? So I took that away from my time working with Wycliffe, which was, it was a long time ago now, but it still sticks with me. So there's 3. Good question, Jared. Thanks for asking that. Very, very good question. All right, I see some more people joining on Instagram. Feel free to drop in your questions there too. Hopefully I didn't miss any. I was focusing over here on YouTube. So Daniel, he asked, speaking of Steve Trey, did he teach Daga Daga Tongue or Doddle Oddle Tongue, or both? Steve Trey does not Doodle Tongue. He will tell you loud and clear that I believe the words were, Doodle Tonguing is the inferior technique, if I remember correctly. So he definitely he's a double tonguer. Daga 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 da. Just check out his tune. If you want to hear a very clear example, you can check out Blackfoot, it's called. It's a contrafact on Cherokee. He definitely double tonguing. Which is what I kind of do. I kind of take a hybrid approach, kind of like I've talked about this on the channel before, but like Marshall Jilks, kind of thinking about how you would say the rhythm, whether it's or a combination of right? It's a kind of a combination of doodle and double. So that's what I do. I don't really doodle tongue, only when it happens naturally. Because if I go it's not clean enough for me. So I want it to be clean, whatever that means. It has to be. Okay. Brian asks, thoughts on Joe Alessi playing jazz? My thoughts are that he's very passionate about learning about jazz, and that he's an amazing trombonist. So that's all there is to that. Yeah, sure, Daniel. Happy to answer that for you. Okay, I don't know how to say this name. So, do you know Jack Nowinski? I do not know that person. Sorry. Taylor says, this may be an open-ended question, but what has helped you boost your sight reading over the years? Reading transcriptions, etudes, big bands. What has helped you the most? What has helped me the most is the desire to be a perfect sight reader. Rather than what it is you're sight reading, it's the desire to want to be a perfect sight reader. And so that means sight reading a lot and holding yourself to the standard and expectation that you're going to sight read it right the first time. So I made it up in my mind at some point that if I wanted to work in New York, I needed to be a perfect sight reader. I could not play it wrong the first time. Turns out you can probably be fine by playing it wrong. Not all the time wrong, but like a couple of mistakes is not a big deal, but I want to get a 95 or above, I don't want to do that. So there's kind of a couple schools to approaching sight reading. One is the volume approach, right, which you just described. Reading big band charts, small group charts, transcriptions, etudes, blah, 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 duets, etc. So I try to do duets with my students. Sometimes we don't end up doing them, but something that's important, something that Mark always did with me was always play duets, always hold me to a standard of like, no, we're not going to move on until you play that darn thing right, because that relates to the next thing. So every time you sight read something, you're absorbing that rhythmic information and that harmonic information into a pattern that you might be able to recognize again later. So that's how I view it. Like, it's pattern recognition. It's developing that ability to recognize patterns and to be able to actually see it again, in the future. What's up? I see some more people joining. What's up, Jose? Okay. So that's what helps. All of the above and holding yourself to that high standard and not moving on until you learn the stuff right. Jackson, what's up, Jackson? What are some tips for staying mentally and physically fresh during long recording sessions? Jackson, you're in the middle of it right now. Again, I really just think it's more of like a mindset thing than anything else, Like, you gotta just stay fresh and not get bogged down. Like, when getting bogged down, it's like you just have to be like, this is what it is, Like, this session is the length that it is. It's going to take as long as it takes, and we're just going to get it right. We're going to do it till we get it right. And so for me, that's how I do it. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's the same sort of concept as what we were just talking about with sight reading. It's like, I decided that I'm going to be engaged all day with this session, no matter how tired I get. And for me, that works, for me to say, I'm in it right now. I will be in it until it's done, and then I'll be tired or whatever. But, physically, I mean, it's just like being relaxed and not trying too hard. The harder you try in the studio, the worse it gets most of the time. The first take is usually the best. There might be mistakes, but it's usually the best in terms of energy. The second one is probably a little cleaner, a little less energy. And then at max, I would do a third take at max, because that third take is going to be like all like, oh, we're doing this again. And it's like, but maybe if you're doing it for a specific reason, you can fix that one specific part. Sometimes it's amazing. That third take might be a really great take. But yeah, 3 takes max for me, and just staying clear. So related to this, Bone Master J, he asked, do you do any non-musical exercises to help get relaxed or in the zone? I mean, I like to stay relaxed, so taking deep breaths is, something just like, and just kind of resetting in that way can be helpful for me, but nothing in particular. I don't prescribe to any like breathing exercises or anything like that. Just try to stay relaxed. And I don't have a hard time concentrating, so I've practiced concentrating for a long time. So just to be able to zone in on something, is a skill that has been slowly developed, and I think it's worthwhile developing. All right, I see a question here on Instagram. How does doubling on higher instruments like trumpet/soprano and alt trombone affect your playing when compared to doubling? I'm guessing that I can't see the rest of the question, but lower instruments. Well, it's just a different experience on your chops. Some people don't have any trouble with it at all, going higher or lower. Most people, I find, have more success going bigger than going smaller, like doubling on tuba and bass trombone rather than going up to trumpet. I'm not a master doubler. That's not like my strength. So I wouldn't say that I'm like the best person to answer exactly like the best techniques for doubling, but I think the people that seem to have the most success are people that just view them as different instruments and try to keep everything separate. When you pick up the trumpet, you're playing the trumpet, and you play the trumpet how you play the trumpet. You don't play the trumpet how you play the trombone. You have to pick it up and have that mindset. So you pick up the bass trombone and you play the bass trombone. You play the tuba. You don't play the tuba like a trombone player. You figure out this is a new embouchure. This is a new thing. Because when you try to interrelate it too much, I feel like the muscles get confused, whether you're going up in size or down in size, whatever. Hopefully you get what I mean. Excuse me. But so I don't think about it too much that way. It kind of is just a new thing. Focus on that thing, you know? Okay, Brian, I'm going to skip over you for a second here. Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. Do you have a specific approach for teaching beginning improv? Many thanks for the Q&A. Yeah, sure. Yes. For teaching beginning improvisation, we do this a lot with our nonprofit, the Institute for Creative Music, when we go into schools to work on beginning improvisation. I like to use tunes that are modal and tunes that are going to have success right away. Tunes where you can learn different parts right away, like a bass line and a melody and maybe some harmony parts, like maybe one chord or two chords. You could use like a kind of a vamp kind of tune, or we used to use a lot of like some Radiohead tunes. But to pick songs that are going to be successful right away. I don't like starting with the blues. Everyone likes to start with the blues, but the blues to me has a lot of the exceptions to the rules rather than the rules themselves. In terms of how harmony works. So I definitely recommend doing something where it's going to allow the students to kind of just participate, allow students to all participate, not like one soloist at a time, but creating group improvisations. Especially the younger and younger you go, the more important it is to engage them at all times. So we do things like non-musical improvisation, even like thinking about making noises, like how do you sound like an elephant on your instrument? What other sounds can you make with your instrument? What does tension sound like on your instrument? What does release sound like on your instrument? And going all the way to those kind of really basic musical examples and getting them excited about improvising, because like the details of a scale to play and stuff are like pretty boring to the average student, I think, especially a younger student. Definitely can be boring to think about scales and all this kind of stuff. So we focus on the musical stuff. We focus on stuff that doesn't require that you have to teach a lot. So like we'll do something in D minor. So it's like, oh, you can just play the F major scale and kind of focus on that sort of modal improvisation. And then like in a jazz quote unquote setting, I'm gonna go to something like So What? And where you can just play modally and just think about the major scale as a starting point, or something like Down by the Riverside, where that's just got 1 and 5 and 1 and 5. So those are some places to start with that. Alton, do you prefer recording your albums in one day or multiple? One day. I don't think it gets better. I feel like if you have to work out the concept of the record, then or if the concept of the record is to play and see what comes out, then you need more days. But when you have everything dialed in beforehand, just do it in a day. Put me on a gig. Okay. I don't have any gigs. There's no gigs right now. So yeah, one day for me. Every record I've made that's mine has been done in one day. Maybe like an overdub session after, maybe. But for the most part, one day. If you could perform in any professional big band that's still playing, which one would it be? Maria Schneider, Jazz Lincoln Center. It's been the same since I was in high school. Both of those. Cool. Yeah, very cool. Okay, let me go back through Instagram, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Trombone in a minute. Hello. Joha. Hello. Christopher. All right, we're good there. Okay, Taylor, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on how teachers should try having positive reinforcement without trying to come across as rude? I've heard stories about people going off on students at UNT. It's generational, man. Like, I think everyone has their own teaching style, you know. I think it's important to develop your own and to develop good rapport with the student so you can be honest with them. I I don't like to yell at anybody because I don't think it's very effective. I had people yell at me and it wasn't effective. I had people be really, not rude, but just really cutting, and it kind of set me off on a path of like trying to prove something, and it isn't a healthy one all the time. And so I try not to do that. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes you just sometimes it happens, you're just like, what is going on? Like, people are not taking this seriously enough. I mean, sorry, phone, now it's back. Okay. You know, you just have to, like, I don't know. There's not, I don't like to come off as rude, but sometimes you are, but sometimes I'm maybe too much the other way, and I try to, you know, soften the blow too much. But I also know that that can be frustrating too, to a student, to not be super clear and direct. But I don't really yell at anybody. I mean, there's some stories about other people, not naming any names, but at institutions everywhere, you know, that go off on people about things. And a lot of it comes from a place of passion, you know, like I can think of some of my teachers, like the only time they would get upset is because they, like, you dedicated your life to this thing. You're trying to impart that knowledge onto some other people, and they're not taking it as seriously as you take it. That can be a little frustrating and be a little, like, it hurts. You're like, man, like, this is serious. Get it together, you know? That's how it feels, you know? It's like, man, like, this is a hard thing you've decided to do, and you're here and you're not putting in the work, and it can be really frustrating. So I think that's where those situations probably come from, is just that confrontation to me always comes from differing expectations, you know? People expect different things, and then when they come together and they go like this, you know, you miss each other, then that's when problems kind of arise. All right. Abel has another question. He says he just started summer break. If you were 18 again and had all this time to shed, how many hours a day would you put in? As many as you can. 4 to 6 is probably reasonable. I would put in an hour to 2 hours on fundamentals, an hour to 2 hours on transcribing and learning jazz vocabulary and playing jazz vocabulary, and then an hour or two working on improvisation particularly. That's what I would do. Just practicing as much as you can. Make sure you get out and play with other people, because you can sometimes end up in a little trap of just practice room stuff. So make sure you get out and try to play with other people, even if it's just like on a private session, or get together with one other person. Practice playing music, because that's a separate practice. All right, what is the homework like for a jazz studies? Well, that depends on what classes you're enrolled in. He asked what the homework is like for a jazz studies / performance major. The thing that I always say to my performance majors is that you signed up, you came to college to be a jazz trombone major. If jazz trombone is not your primary focus, we're kind of doing something wrong. So like your lesson, your improv class, your ensembles, like that to me is like where your focus should be at. And it should be at, you know, developing yourself as an artist and as a person, and developing your skills there. So if you're not practicing every day, you're doing it wrong. If you're, you know, like the hierarchy should be that that stuff comes first, classes come last, right? And I'm not saying that because I think you should fail your classes. I think you should get an A in all your classes. I'm just saying, in terms of priorities, if I'm going to skimp on something and say like give a B effort instead of an A effort, I would recommend that you do that in your core class, not in your music class, because you came to school to be a music major, to try to be a performer. So if you want to be a performer, that is like, you got to be at the top of your game. So anyway, that's just my rant about that. But in terms of what it's like, it really depends on where you go to school. There's a lot higher expectation at Juilliard on the performance side than there is, you know, at a community college, where probably your classes are the main focus and that the music stuff is not the main focus. So just depends on the situation. Exhortation would be a good jazz composition. Sounds like a jazz title. You're right, Kevin. Okay, let's see here. All right. I got a couple more minutes here, so feel free to continue dropping in those questions today. Let's see. I see some more coming in on YouTube. Okay, Taylor says, the first time when you auditioned for Juilliard and didn't get in, what do you remember about your audition that stood out when you were thought, I seriously need to improve on fill the blank? I needed to improve on vocabulary and knowledge of jazz, and I realized I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought that jazz was just picking up songs and playing them, like you listened to it and you just like learned through osmosis, and that it just kind of happened sort of naturally. Yeah, like I didn't know tunes. I didn't know what things were. I didn't know records. I just was like, I don't know anything. I realized that I didn't know anything. And then I got into my freshman jazz theory class at Eastman, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like theory and chords, and like there were so many things I didn't know. I didn't even know what I didn't know. I just thought like, oh, I was pretty good for high school kids, so I was going to get into Juilliard, and that was not the case. And you have to be serious about the music to get in there. You have to know what it's going on. You got to know records. You got to be able to play like your favorite players. You got to know songs. You got to not rely on sheet music. You got to like, you got to go into the details. The devil's always in the details, right? So that first time was just like a smack in the face. Like, hey, you need to get this together if you think you're going to come to this place, Like I remember this very specifically. I played Stardust in the key of D major. Why? Because it was in Jamie Aebersold's book in the key of D. And they asked me, why are you playing Stardust in the key of D major? And I said, oh, I don't know. That's what the music said. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I was confused. And then I realized I was just embarrassed, because I was like, oh, I don't know what they're even talking about. I don't even know a recording of Stardust that I could point to what the key was. Like, and just having that level of knowledge, like being good at your instrument in high school and being funneled towards music school is a different thing than like being really into the music. That's something I talk about when people ask me, like, what do I look for in an incoming student? I say, well, somebody that listens to jazz and is interested in playing jazz, and oftentimes it's like there's people that play jazz in high school, but they don't actually like jazz. They just want to play not classical. So at any rate, there was like kind of a light bulb, like, hey, there's all this stuff to check out. There was a masterclass two or 3 years before that with Wynton Marsalis at Eastman that I got my butt handed to me at that as well. And so those kind of experiences just was like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. And I had 4 years and I figured it out. I didn't think I got in for my master's. I thought I failed that audition horribly. So hopefully that answers your question, Taylor. Okay. Abel has another question. How does one work on improvisation? I understand fundamentals in language, but not how to practice improvisation. You practice improvisation by, there's a lot of different methods, but you don't just turn on Jamie Aebersold and just play. You have exercises that you use. So you get with a teacher that knows what to do and can kind of help guide you through this. So or it doesn't even have to be a teacher, just another musician that can give you some tidbits and like trade choruses, go back and forth. If there's hard spots, you got to work on the sound. Like, do you know what the chord is? What scale goes with the chord? What's the arpeggio? Spell it up to the 13th. All of that stuff. Get the nuts and bolts. And then you got to start playing, say, make a vamp out of that one chord. Say it's F major 7 sharp 11. So if you don't know what that is, you got to learn the arpeggio. You got to learn the scale that goes with it. You got to learn the sound. You got to learn to make melodies with it so that when you have it for only 2 beats or 4 beats, you can connect the dots really quickly. So I like to practice improvisation like I would practice any etude. So 1 bar at a time. Practice improvising on each sound, then practice connecting 2 sounds together. So maybe 2 chords together. Maybe it's a 2-5-1, maybe it's a 5-1, maybe it's modal changes. But you break it down one sound at a time, get used to the change between, and give yourself some rhythmic limitations. I like to say, okay, let's do note against note counterpoint. So one note, I'm going to pick one note per chord, and I'm trying to make a line that makes sense. Then I might do half notes. Then I'm going to do quarter notes. Then I'm going to do eighth notes. One rhythm, just working on the harmony. So you give yourself limitations. That's how you practice improvisation. Okay, let's see here. Taylor says, coming from community college, I agree. That must have been about classes. Pitch Police would be a good song name. Yeah. What kind of assignments do you give your students? All kinds of assignments. We work on classical trombone, jazz trombone, writing songs, writing arrangements, bringing in transcriptions, playing etudes, playing repertoire, learning standards, learning original compositions, learning compositions by the people that they like to listen to, doing deep dives. The next question's from Jack Courtwright, and he did a deep dive on some Dave Holland tunes, some Coltrane stuff. So it's kind of a combination of fundamentals, trombone history, and what the student wants to learn. Jackson Churchill, you get to pick one trombonist for each decade since 1960. Who are you picking? Do you mean born in that decade or active in that decade? I'll come back to you. Do you think it's important for musicians to play with people from other generations, hiring sidemen who are far older / younger than you, for example? Man, it's definitely a good question. I do think it's important, and I want to do it more. I wish I have done it more. Like, I haven't gotten the chance. I mean, in school, you get to play with the guys that are a lot older, and they can give you some good context about the music. They can kick your butt, you know. But yeah, that's always something I wanted to do more of. So I do think it's important. And Jeremy Pelt in his stories was talking about this exact comment yesterday, Instagram stories. He was talking about this and had some good ideas around it. But the part of the story that's missing is that there's not as many opportunities to go and work as a sideman for those people anymore. Like, who are you going to go play with? Like, who? Tell me, you know, like, I don't know. Who are the people that I know that play with those people, have people in their band that are younger than them, but they're 2 generations older than me. So I don't know, you know. I do think it's a good experience though. I think it's important. I think it's how you learn. You learn on the bandstand, you learn from people that have done it for longer. So is it essential? I don't know, but is it an important learning experience? For sure. Kevin says, successive approximations. Oh, I don't know what that was in reference to. He says, successive approximations is the behavioral term. All right. Okay, so Jackson is clarifying his question. He says, active in the 60s. Okay, so active in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Hey, come on, man. All right, so 60s, JJ and Curtis were both still alive. So I'm going to say JJ because then I can say Curtis in the 70s because Curtis was still playing, but JJ moved to LA to become a film composer during the 70s. So I'll say JJ in the 60s. I'll say Curtis in the 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, I would say the 80s, it's got to be Steve Turre. Got to be Steve Turre, but there's also Robin Eubanks, kind of active in the 70s into the 80s. In the 80s, I mean, 80s into 90s. I think 2000s, I was super into, this is kind of like bridging the gap, like 90s into 2000s would be like Robin Eubanks and the Dave Holland Quintet. But then in 2000s also is kind of like Wycliffe Gordon for, you know, especially for me. But he was most active, all his records, end of the 90s into the 2000s. So I'm kind of like a Turre and Robin Eubanks and Steve Davis. I'm kind of like, maybe we can make them 7 years apiece instead of 10 years and kind of squeeze them all into those decades. And then, you know, somebody like Wycliffe Gordon in the 2000s, and then 2010s has got to be, you know, Deese and Marshall Gilks and Michael Deese. And then this next generation, this current decade, 2020s, I don't know. It's yet to be seen. Yet to be seen. All right, Brazil's in the house on Instagram. Hope everybody's doing well, staying safe down there. In learning improv, what you described is called successive approximation. Oh, okay. So in learning, using limitations is what I was talking about, or just kind of connecting one small idea to the next. So that's good to hear. So I'm not totally off base. That's good. Oh, Taylor says, what's your favorite Brazilian record? I don't know that I know enough Brazilian music to have a favorite, to be honest. I've been checking about Egberto Gismonti recently. He's got a lot of records. What's the worst performance you've ever seen? Oh my goodness. Oh man. I mean, it's got to be like a washed up cruise ship one-man band, like dude that's like playing with like I definitely saw this as a kid, like playing like just like a Casio keyboard with the beats, and like he's singing and he like plays a saxophone, and I'm like, oh man, that person, now I reflect back and be like, man, that person had probably a bunch of successive things that happened that sucked and that led to that situation, but which is sucky for that person. And I don't mean to like make fun of that person or their situation, but that's probably the worst thing, seeing someone like that. That's like, you could just tell that they're so desperate, at the end of their rope kind of situation. It's sad, but that's probably the worst. All right, Jack, I see your question. Okay, Abel then says, what's the best performance you've ever seen? Best performance I've ever seen. That's a good question. I've seen a lot of performances that did not live up to the hype in my mind, but I think that's what happens as you get more experience in a genre or with music. Like the magic tends to leave. It's not as like mysterious and magical anymore because you've heard it a lot, or like you learn more about it, or you learn the mechanics, you see how the sausage is made kind of thing. I think that's definitely been the case for me for a long time. I don't know if there's best. I can think of like certain musicians who the first time I heard them that like kind of made my mind explode. And that was the first time I heard Wycliffe Gordon. The first time, and that was like when I was in high school. And then the first time I heard Maria Schneider's group was at Eastman and in the Eastman Theater. That was kind of mind blowing. And then the first time I heard Lionel Lueke's trio, a great guitarist. He plays with Herbie Hancock now, but his trio came to the Rochester Jazz Festival and played. That was like mind blowing. Yeah, all those things that come to mind. I don't know about best performance though. Let's see. Okay, so Jack says, you've been asked to assemble a trivia team made up of trombonists, yourself, and 4 others. Who is your trivia team? Normal trivia, not jazz/trombone trivia. Oh, that's a good question. A team made up of trombonists for normal trivia. So people that know a lot of stuff about random stuff. I don't know. I feel like Ryan Caberly would be good at trivia. I don't actually know though. People that are smart, like book smart, I don't know. I'll just pick some people, I guess. I feel like Steve Davis probably knows a bunch of stuff. James Burton. Michael Deese knows a lot of like pop trivia. James and Mike go back and forth on like the pop culture stuff sometimes. So I picked Deese, James Burton. How many was it? Steve Davis, Caberly, Jilks. That was too many. Maybe we'll exclude me because I don't know anything. Okay. All right. This will be the last one for today from Taylor. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday, I think. Yeah, we'll probably be back next Friday. What type of music are you listening to now that's expanding your hearing? Anything from Africa, blah, blah, blah. I'm listening to a lot of what's coming out. This morning I listened to Chris Potter has a new record out today. I can tell you what it is. Where'd my Spotify go? Here it is. It is called... why can't I go to the record? There it is. It's called Sunrise Reprise. So, I don't know. I'm listening to a lot of the electronic / jazz crossover stuff that's been coming out. That's on a lot of the playlists on Spotify, and just kind of seeing what's up with that and seeing if I resonate with it. I listened to a lot of Afro-Cuban music when I was at Eastman because I was working in that scene a lot. I played mostly salsa gigs for like 4 years. And that was super, super fun and super deep dive into people like Jimmy Bosch and like more modern people like Luis Bonilla and Conrad, of course, and there's people like Doug Beavers and a lot of people. But, Jimmy Bosch and Barry, I'm blanking on his last name, Barry Rogers, sorry, great trombonist in that style. I guess they're like the New York salsa style, but anyway, so there's a whole like world to dive into there. But I kind of was into that world when I was working in that world more. So, and now I'm working more as a label person, so I'm kind of more interested in like seeing where the music is and where it's heading and kind of what's happening. But I'm not super deep listening to anything right now, just kind of a lot of different stuff. But you mentioned Arnold Schoenberg. I don't like to listen to that. That's interesting to study, and I think I use a lot of the tools that those composers use in my own composition, but I don't find it to be that aesthetically pleasing. I mean, I'm definitely a person that I will listen to music that challenges my sensibilities, but in terms of like I'm going to turn something on, probably not Schoenberg. But definitely interesting, and I think the compositional applications of that serialism movement are super interesting in jazz. And if you want to check that out more, I definitely recommend Miles Okazaki is really, really kind of deep into this kind of application of serialism to jazz, not in an overt way, but you can see from how he thinks about things that's part of his methodology there. He did a whole series last year about all different shapes and relating them to these serial pitch sets, which is super interesting to me, and how it relates to harmony. But yeah, okay. All right. Favorite rapper? I don't have a favorite rapper. I don't listen to rap. Yes, he's another Juilliard grad. Miles is. Yeah, I first got to know him. We were teaching jazz camp together in West Palm Beach, Florida. Classic era of my life. Juilliard life. Being in West Palm Beach, because those camps were really long. They were like 2 weeks long, jazz camps. And yeah, anyway, Miles, he was really into playing chess at that time, and I was terrible, so we didn't play. But it was really inspiring to see everything he was into and working on. So I haven't really stayed very well in touch with him, but he kind of intimidates me because he's so smart and so good at music. So, what's up, Trevor, Alex, Andrew? Thanks for joining. We're going to wrap up the Q&A for today. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking with me. And we're rolling right along. It's May 14th today. So hope you have an amazing week. And we'll catch you next week.